As these stage 3 tax cuts are overhauled by the government, the questions keep on coming, such as why is cost of living relief required if inflation is coming down? Also, whether this move leaves Australia with uncompetitive tax rates for the smartest and brightest people here. Business Editor Ross Greenwood joins me now to answer all of these questions. Ross, let's start with that question about the competitiveness of our tax system. How do we compare?
Well, look, this is a political decision. Let's be honest about this. And this is about a numbers game for the government. The government is basically banking that more people will get more of a tax cut and therefore forget the broken promise. So that's the key. But for people at the upper end, and somebody's got to actually argue a case for them, also need some cost of living relief. Now, you can argue about how much. And the Treasurer, of course, has been out this morning really trying to sell this and saying that everybody will get a tax cut and they're going to raise the limit for the top tax rate to $200,000. But it's worth just looking around the world just to see if you're a young person coming out of university with a bright idea, where would you actually want to be based? Now, Australia, the top tax rate here, 45%. I've just picked a few at random that have lower tax rates. So Brazil, 27.5%. Canada, there's local taxes on top, 33%. Singapore, 24%. Or 20%, and Singapore 24%, which is fairly close and a place where people will go. Now, there are places that are closer to Australia, such as some of the European nations. You can see there, the UK, France at 45% like us. The USA, 37%, although there are often local taxes that can come into this. New Zealand, 39%. While we're watching this one, though, just keep a little eye here, because that US rate of 37% doesn't kick in until $578,000 US dollars, so almost $700,000. Here in Australia, it kicks in at 200,000. In New Zealand, that rate kicks in at 180,000 New Zealand dollars. And in the UK, it doesn't kick in until $125,400. Basically, you can pretty much double that. You're talking 250, 260,000 Australian dollars. So this is where Australians ultimately do pay more tax as they go up the scale. And that's where the competitiveness for the brightest brains, the sharpest minds, really does come from.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating table to look at and something that we should keep in mind. It doesn't look like the government has considered all of that in making that decision. Australia is the best country in the world to live, so I guess they've got that on their side. But the government did make this decision, Ross, for political reasons, to give more assistance to middle and lower income earners. How's that going to work?
Okay,
Inflationary?
So here's a question. Who actually pays tax in this country? Who pays net tax in this country? So the tax office puts out really good statistics about exactly that. And I'm just going to show you a few bits and pieces. Now, the tax cuts that they're going to change are going to be skewed to people earning less than $45,000, even though it will go up the chain a bit more than that. There's 3.9 million workers there. They pay in total, those people, $828 million in tax, but they claim back in deductions, family tax benefits, a whole range of other things, $7.3 billion. So in other words, those people who earn $45,000 or less receive from the government in welfare $6.5 billion more than they actually pay out in tax. Right, so get this, they're already net taking more, way more from the government than what they're actually paying to the government because they pay very little tax. So then let's go to the next step and have a look at those at the top end. 1 million workers earn more than, let's call it $150,000, give or take, $148,000. They pay $21.4 billion in tax. They claim $4.2 billion in tax deductions, so that might be, I have no interest on a negatively geared property or whatever it might be. So they pay net tax of $17.2 billion. So when it comes to tax relief here, the question is who genuinely pays the tax and therefore who needs the relief? And so really this is where, in many ways, this is forgotten in Australia, that those people on very low incomes do not pay very much tax anyway. And so this is really, in many ways, a welfare handout to many of those people, baked into the tax system and therefore not able to be taken away in the future. If it was one-off benefits, you might understand it. But as inflation is coming down, their wages are rising. And so as a result, this is going to turn around and future governments are going to maybe find themselves in a position where they're wondering why this government gave away so much money to so many people at this time.
Oh, it's a good question, Ross, and you're right to point that out. I've been pointing this out consistently on this program for the last couple of days, all of last year as well, that if you earn $45,000, $50,000 a year, you're essentially paying no net tax. Now, the inflation argument as well, you're right to point out that, okay, inflation is easing. The RBA has said as much, Treasury estimates say as much. So that inflation argument from Anthony Albanese and the Treasurer Jim Chalmers just doesn't fly. If that was the case, why didn't they do this a year ago? But
100%.
also,
Precisely.
the
That is
argument
exactly
about
right, Laura.
this, Ross. Yeah, well, why didn't they do it a year ago? Well, I can answer that for you. It's because their political stocks, they lost Middle Australia during the Voice debate. It was a botched campaign and they lost a lot of skin there. So they needed to do this now. This was the drastic measure. The other question I have for you, Ross, is that during the global financial crisis, we were told by the Labor government at the time, in order to stimulate the economy, we need to give these cash handouts to the lowest earning people, the poorest in society, because they will spend every single dollar and recycle it into the economy. Isn't that going to happen now? And won't that be inflationary?
Well, precisely. Have a look at the savings rate right now. Now, we do know that there is a squeeze on the cost of living, particularly for those people who are renting properties, who have got mortgages. And so as a result, you're right, every dollar that they spend that they receive will be spent. And so as a result of that, guess what? Inflation will not come down as quickly. It may defer the Reserve Bank from reducing interest rates, which really does take pressure off the cost of living for most Australians that have a mortgage, that have rent potentially. And so, the government may be compounding the problem, because right now you've got a government that's seeking to stimulate the economy, while at the same time you get the Reserve Bank that's seeking to cool the economy. And so they're working at odds with each other, which is not good economic policy.
Nope. Okay, Ross, how'd the markets open?
Let's have a look at the markets. Hey, we're actually a bit better. So there were some big results out overnight. Tesla was one of those. So if we have a quick look at the ASX 200, the market up by more than 1/3%, 28 points at the moment. Where's the Aussie dollar as we sit? Let's have a quick look at that one as well. It's been hovering around 65, 66 US cents for a while, 65 3/4 US cents, give or take. The one I want to look at, which does affect our cost of living, the oil price. Just have a quick look at this one, because it has basically come off in recent times, down to $80 US a barrel, on Brent crude up a little bit in the past day or so. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Ross. We'll see you soon.